Hi everybody. I hope paper one went okay for you and you're not dreading paper two on Friday too much. This video is just to go through what to do on paper two, a little reminder, but also it's to just highlight the little differences that are on paper two compared to previous years. So some of the papers you've done for past papers might be slightly different to the paper that you'll get on Friday. Now, don't worry about that because actually all the changes have made things easier. So I think anyway. So don't panic too much and think, oh no, I'm not prepared for that, because actually everything that I'm going to show you is just helps you more really. So the first thing is that if you've done it in previous years or a mock or something, you might have only had 2 hours. Well, they've very generously given you another 5 minutes, which is, it helps a little bit, doesn't it? But as some people have commented on here, it isn't really that much more. It's only 20 minutes more than paper one, and you've got to read 2 texts, and you've got 7 reading questions rather than 4, haven't you? So I always think that timing is actually quite an issue sometimes for paper two, and people that can finish paper one comfortably sometimes struggle a little bit with paper two. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about timing first of all, and then I'm going to quickly go through each of the questions just so you know what to expect. Okay, so you've got 2 hours, 5 minutes, you've got the 2 texts, so you've got roughly about 1 hour, 15 minutes to do the 7 reading questions, and then you've got about 45 or 50 minutes to do the writing question. So I think it's quite tricky to kind of remember, like, so many minutes per mark and this many per question, and I think you just end up forgetting what to do. So this is my advice. First of all, you need to do text one, which is 3 questions. Spend about 25, absolute maximum 30 minutes on that one. So you can kind of have 30 minutes as a rule of thumb, but try to stick just under that. Then text 2, again, the 4 questions 4, 5 and 6. Now don't panic too much because only one of those is a long question. Questions 4 and 5 are short. Again, about 25 to 30 minutes. Then 7A and B, obviously you've already read the texts by that point, so you don't need quite as long. So you need maybe 15 to 20 minutes for those ones. And I'll show you some tips on how you can do 7A and B quite quickly and easily if you've done the other questions well. Okay, and then you've got the writing, which you obviously only pick one question and do that in about 50 minutes. So I recommend to some students, I've got students who struggle with writing for 2 hours and run out of steam, run out of energy, run out of confidence by the time they get to the writing, which is actually their strongest point. So if that applies to you, do the writing first, and then do the reading. Okay, so it's up to you. You'll know what your strengths and weaknesses are, or maybe what your teachers advised you. So go with that. Go with what you've been practicing in your mocks and things like that. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at how to approach each question, and it will include a little update on how things are a little bit different. So first of all, we're going to look at the text. So this is a specimen text. You might have done one of these in a mock or in class or something. So this is text 1 for this question. And what I say to my students is make sure you really think carefully about this text before you even attempt the questions. Okay, so the really important things to do are to read this bit at the top. So people sometimes forget to do that, but it's really, really important to help you to understand the context of the text. And it will also help you to do this, which is to do the PAF, okay, which is thinking about purpose, audience, and format. Now you might think, oh, this is a waste of time, I haven't got time to do that. But actually, if you do this, that will really, really help you in questions to come. So first of all, I always start with a format. So that means what kind of text is. So we have a look. We've got My Darling Wife. We've got a date. It says extract from Love Letters of the Great War. You've got stupidly they put this on a separate page at the back, but you've got here from Bert. So obviously this is the format is a letter. Yeah. Okay. Now be really careful. If you have a letter in the exam, that's got to set your alarm bells ringing, because you've got to think, okay, who is the audience? With a letter, the audience, or aka the reader, isn't you. Okay, if you're reading a novel or something like that, you can say, well, yeah, the reader's me. But Bert didn't write this letter to you, did he? He wrote this letter to his darling wife. He didn't expect you to be reading this letter. Obviously, his wife's kind of donated it to a museum or whatever when she died or whatever. But when he's writing this letter, in his head, the reader or the audience is his wife. Okay, so if you get a question later on about the effect on the reader, it's not going to be about you. It's going to be about how his wife would have reacted, what the effect would have been on her. Okay, so the audience is the wife. Okay, now in some cases, if it's like a newspaper article or something like that, then perhaps you might be expected to be the reader or the audience, in which that's fine. But in cases of letters, think about specifically who is the audience. And also in the case of a speech, often speeches are only made to a certain group of people, aren't they? Or to influence a certain group of people. So really think about who the audience is. Okay, and the purpose. So we haven't read the whole text yet, but it was written it says here it was written from a soldier to his wife in World War One. So you could you could check, obviously you're going to read through the text, and you can adapt what the purpose was, put a bit more flesh on the purpose. But why would a soldier write home to his wife? And it's to say he loves her and to reassure her that he's still alive, that kind of thing. So we put something like reassure. Okay, I've got terrible writing, I'm sorry. Reassure and love, something like that. Okay, and obviously when you read it through, you can go and add extra stuff to that. Okay, so let's quickly look at the questions. So these look very similar to what you've seen before, but they've made them a bit easier. So you don't have to, for example, question 2, you don't have to look for like a language and explain the language. All you have to do is find 2 quotes, the same as question 1. Okay, so literally 2 quotes or items from the text in number 1, and then two quotes from the text again in 2. Okay, you don't need to do any explanations, identify language features, anything like that. It's literally just highlight it in the text and then copy it out. Okay, so that's much better than the other exam. Right, the next question is, as always, language and structure. Okay, but as you can see here, they've made it a little bit more straightforward for you guys now, because they've actually added this bit here, which wasn't there before. So that just kind of super reminds you that you need to write about language features, and you need to write about structural features, and you need to write about the effect on the reader. So that ties back to your audience. Yeah, so who is the reader? So what you're thinking about in this question, what language and structural features is Bert using to interest and engage? And this question, I think, every time is interest and engage his wife. Okay, so what words and phrases, etc., is going to interest her? Okay, and so remember, language, the most important thing is to find single word analysis, find some words in there. So what words are going to interest and engage her? Okay, and then structure, think about listing, think about maybe questions, that kind of thing. Okay, look back on my proper video on question 3 if you want more details on that. Okay, so moving on then. Okay, so moving on, we've got text 2. So remember what you need to do here. So you need to do your path. See if I can do this a bit neater this time. Okay, so remember, we can usually get most of this information from here and then also from a little sort of scroll through the text. Okay, so this one indicates that it's an extract taken from the introduction to a book. Okay, so it's a part of a book. Okay, now who's going to read this book? She's a campaigner against hunger and poverty, and the book is called A Girl Called Jack, 100 Delicious Budget Recipes, and she discusses her experience of living on a budget. Okay, so obviously it's a book, so it's more of a general audience, anyone can read it, but who is actually going to read it? Who's going to pick up a book saying 100 delicious budget recipes? Okay, so it's going to be people who are interested in cooking, people who maybe are living on a budget. Yeah, so cooking, budget. It's going to be adults, isn't it? Usually, maybe students, maybe parents particularly. Okay, and then purpose. Why is she writing this book? So obviously she's writing this book to give us some budget recipes, but this bit here isn't all about budget recipes. This is like the introduction, isn't it? So she's introducing, and you have a little scan through, or you just have a little guess and you think, well, she's introducing how you can live on a budget. Maybe something like how you can live on healthy food. Oh dear, hopefully your writing will be better than mine. Okay, so that will give you some ideas on the purpose. Okay, so these will come in handy when you come to look at the questions. So first of all, you've basically got 2 1-mark questions, and again you're just finding phrases. Okay, so these questions, are there only 1 mark? They're quite straightforward. Just obviously check the line numbers, make sure you don't use the wrong line number. But also they help you to understand the text. So even if you don't understand the text very well, you can, if you read the question, oh, Jack and her son are having problems. Okay, so that tells you they're having problems. You don't even have to understand the text to know that. So it's always worth doing those questions. Question 6 hasn't changed from the previous years. It's exactly the same, and it's this evaluate question. Okay, so remember, you've got the word there, successfully. That reminds you that you need to use these kind of words in your answer, like successfully, effectively, skillfully. And in this case, it says how the others are affected by her experience. So how successfully does she show that? So you just go through the text, find different people that are affected by her experience and how they're affected, find the quotes from that, and then you can think about the purpose of the text, see if you can bring that in, and then do your answer about that. Again, look at my video on question 6 if you want more information on that. And don't forget, you can write about language, do single word analysis, and you can write about structure in question 6 if it's relevant. Okay, 7A again hasn't changed from previous years. Remember on this one, just short comparison of similarities. So you find something that is the same in both texts, and in this case to do with Bert and Jack. So for example, both Bert and Jack suffer for hardships, or both Bert and Jack live in difficult environments or something, and then just show a quote. So one similarity, quote from text 1, quote from text 2, another similarity, quote from text 1, quote from text 2. I would leave it just at 2, unless you've got loads of time and you could try a third one. But basically, to get 6 marks, it's about the quality of the answer rather than having 3 examples. So I'd probably just stick with the 2 similarities. And then 7B, again, this has changed a little bit. in the previous years. So you've got just, and again, it's just more help. So now you've got some little bullet points to help you to remember what to compare. Okay. So the ideas and perspectives of the writers. So this is really what their point of view is, what their tone is, what their attitude is, and then some examples of how they're presented, which would be how it's written. So you're comparing the way that the two texts are written and the way that they put their points of view across. So this is where PAF comes into its own. I would say your first paragraph here, write about the difference between PAF. So text 1 is a letter, and so it's only written to a single person, his wife, and this is reflected in the fact that it uses whatever language, blah, blah, blah. Whereas text 2 is written to a wider audience, and so it uses more of a whatever kind of language, that kind of thing. Okay, so you can really use PAF to just get your first answer down, your first bit of the answer. Then you can go back to your question 3 and question 6. So both your texts, you should have annotated those texts already. You can go back and use those annotated texts to find language or structure features that you can compare. So for example, do both texts use first person, or does one use first person, one use third person? Why is that? Is one text more positive and one more negative? Is one more serious or more funny? Does one use more questions or one use more statements? And why is that? Okay, so really 7B is very easy because you can just find anything and compare it. And finally, coming on to writing, I'm just going to show you one example here. So again, think about PAF. So think about what is the format. So here you've got a letter. Who's the audience? Well, you're writing to the newspaper, so it's people reading the newspaper are going to be reading it. And what's the purpose? We've got to give your views on this healthy eating. Okay, so make sure part of the mark scheme is that you have covered those, that you are showing clearly that you've addressed the audience, you've got the correct format, and you've shown the purpose. Okay, so make sure you include those. You've got some handy bullet points here, so you've got some really good ideas about what to include. My top tip on this would be to make it a kind of really good answer, almost have in your own mind a kind of a tone or an attitude or a register. So maybe don't be you, be somebody. You might think, oh, I don't really care about healthy food, so what? But why don't you adopt the persona of someone who really cares about it? So be some kind of health freak, or be some kind of, grumpy old person who's like, well, in my day we just ate spam and chips, or I don't know, be some kind of, have a really strong characteristic, be an interesting persona, and that's going to help you to write in a more interesting way and use such stronger and more interesting language. Okay, and don't forget, whatever type of text you're doing, really you can put some persuasive language features in. So you might have learnt forest or rapid forest or something like that. Whatever you've learnt, try and include some interesting language features, and of course remember your punctuation, really good vocabulary, everything like that. Okay, so I'm going to do another little video just with really short top tips, because this has been quite a long one, because it's quite a long exam paper. But good luck, and I hope you do really well on the exam.